But if you try to get one up on the universe and you're in competition with it, it means you don't understand you are it. You think there's a real difference between self and other. But self, what you call yourself and what you call other, are mutually necessary to each other, like back and front. They're really one. But just as a magnet polarizes itself in north and south, but it's all one magnet. So experience polarizes itself as self and other. But it's all one. So if you try to make the North Pole get the mastery of it, or the South Pole get the mastery of the North Pole, you show you don't know what's going on. A guru or teacher who wants to get this across to somebody because he knows it himself, and when you know it, you know you'd like others to see it too. So what he does is he gets you into being ridiculous harder and more assiduously than usual. In other words, if you are in a contest with the universe, he's going to stir up that contest until it becomes ridiculous. And so he sets you such tasks as saying, now, of course, in order to be a true person, you must give up yourself, be uncertain. So the Lord steps down out of heaven and says, first and great commandment is, thou shalt love the Lord thy God. You must love me. We have been brought up to experience ourselves as isolated centers of awareness and action, placed in a world that is not us, that is foreign, alien, other, which we confront. Whereas in fact, the way an ecologist describes human behavior is as an action. What you do is what the whole universe is doing at the place you call here and now. You are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something the whole ocean is doing. This is not what you might call a fatalistic or deterministic idea. You see, you might be a fatalist if you think that you are a sort of puppet which life pushes around. You are separate from life, but life dominates you. That's fatalism. The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real, deep down, you is the whole universe, and it's doing your living organism and all its behavior. It's expressing it as a singer sings a song. We've been hoodwinked into the feeling that we exist only inside our skins. That is a hallucination. It's just as nutty as anybody could be like a fruitcake, who thinks he's Napoleon or something or other, thinks he's a poached egg and goes around finding a piece of toast to sit on. It's just like that, a hallucination. We need to experience ourselves in such a way that we could say that our real body is not just what's inside the skin, but our whole total external environment. Because if we don't experience ourselves that way, we mistreat our environment. We treat it as an enemy. We try to beat it into submission, and if we do, that comes disaster. We exploit the world we live in. We don't treat it with love and gentleness and respect. We cut down millions of acres of forest to turn it into newspaper of all things. Lovely trees turned into information about nothing, and we don't replace them properly. We kick the world around in revenge for feeling that really we are puppets, which the world kicks around. We need a new kind of consciousness in which every individual becomes aware that his real self is not just his conscious ego. Let's take a headlight of a car. The headlight shines on the road in front. The headlight does not shine on the wire, which connects it with its own battery. So in a way, the headlight is unaware of how it shines, and in the same way, we are unaware of the sources of our consciousness. We don't know how we know. There was a young man who said, though, it seems that I know what I would like to see is the eye that knows me when I know that I know that I know. And so we are we ignore. It doesn't come within the scope of our attention, how it is that we manage to be conscious, how it is that we manage to grow our hair, to shape our bones, to beat our heart, and to secrete all the necessary fluids that we need from our glands. We do it, but we don't know how we do it. Because you see underneath the superficial self which pays attention to this, and that there is another self more really us than I. And if you become aware of that unknown self, the more you become aware of it, the more you realize that it is inseparably connected with everything else that there is. That you are a function of this total galaxy bounded by the Milky Way, and that furthermore, this galaxy is a function of all other galaxies. And that vast thing that you see far off the telescopes, and you look and look and look, one day you're going to wake up and say, why, that's me? Because most of us consider ourselves as chauffeurs inside our bodies, which we own in the same way as you own a car. And when it goes wrong, you take it to the mechanic to fix it. You don't really identify with your body, just as you don't really identify with your car. So here's this whole theory of nature, which has grown up in the West as an artifact, something made. Now let me take a second theory of nature. This is an Indian theory, East Indian. Nature not as an artifact, but as drama. Basic to all Hindu thought is the idea that the world is Maya. That is a Sanskrit word which means many things. It means magic, illusion, art, play, all that. Worlds are staged, and in the Hindu idea, there is the ultimate reality of the universe is the self, which they call Brahman or Atman. That's what there is. The self, universal, eternal, boundless, indescribable. And everything that happens on the self. Like you say, it's on me. The drinks tonight are on me. Or like we say when you hear the radio, it's on the speaker. You see, everything you hear on the radio, flutes, drums, human voices, traffic noises, any imaginable sound, all those sounds are vibrations of the diaphragm, and then the announcer doesn't come on and say every morning, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is KQED. The following sounds that you are going to hear are vibrations of the diaphragm in your speaker." And they're not really human voices or musical instruments, but just that. They never let you in on that. And in exactly the same way, the universe doesn't let you in on the truth that all sense experiences are vibrations of the self. Not just yourself, but the self. And all of us share this self in common because it is pretending to be all of us. What is called not existing is quite incapable of being there without the contrast of something called existing. It's like the crest and the trough of a wave. You can't have a wave that is all trough and no crest, just as you can't have a wave which is all crest and no trough. Such a thing has never been manifested in the physical universe. They go together. And that is the secret. There really is no other secret than that. And you are so sweetly beautiful. I'm still in my love. If you are so sweetly in love, you don't care if I'm your treasure. You're waiting for me. But it is thoroughly repressed. And therefore, we are all educated to feel that we've got to fight for the white because the black might win. We've got to survive. You must survive. That's the great thing we're all working under. And pounding it out day after day in anxiety. Because this is a description of anxiety. Anxiety is the fear that one of a pair of opposites might cancel the other forever. And if by any chance, by any means, you find out that that is not so, you have an entirely new attitude to what human beings are doing. The central doctrine of the Hindu way of life, I call it that rather than a religion, is in Sanskrit Tatvamasi. You're it. To put it in a kind of colloquial way, you're it. And it is the which than which there is no witcher, which they call the Brahman, or the Atman, with a capital A, meaning the self. You are only just kidding that you're just poor, little me. See, the function of a guru, that is to say a spiritual teacher in India, is to give you a funny look in the eye. Because he sees in you the Brahman, the Godhead, just claiming it's poor little me. And he's going to eventually, by all sorts of subtle techniques that are called in Sanskrit upaya, that in politics means chicanery, and in spiritual education means skillful pedagogy. He is going to try and kid you back into realizing who you really are. That's why he gives you a funny look. Why he seems to see right through you. As if to say, Shiva, oh boy, don't kid me. I know who you are. You're coming on beautifully in this act, that you're somebody else altogether. And I congratulate you. You're doing a wonderful job playing this part, which you call the person, my person. You know, a person is a fake. The word means a mask. So if you read books on how to be a real person, you're reading books on how to be a genuine fake. The word persona, as you know, means a mask, worn in Greek or Roman drama. So if you come on to the guru and say, well, he asks you who you are, Sri Ramana Maharshi, when anybody came to him and they said to him, as people do, who was I in my last incarnation? Or will I be reincarnated again? He always replied, who's asking the question? And everybody was irritated because he wouldn't give them answers about what they were in their former lives. He just said, who are you? And he looked at you. Have you looked at photographs of this man? I keep a photograph of him, close by because of the humor in his eyes. They're looking at you with a dancing twinkle, saying, come off it. Now then, in these Asiatic traditions, it is well recognized that people who get the knowledge that it may very well run amok. And therefore they always couple any method of gaining this, whether it is yoga, whether it is smoking something or drinking something or whatever is the method, they always couple it with a discipline. Now I know the word discipline isn't very popular these days, and I would like to have a new word for it. I would prefer to use the word skill. Skill. Discipline is a way of expression. Say you want to express your feelings in stone. Now stone doesn't give way very easily. It's tough stuff. And so you have to learn the skill or the discipline of the sculptor in order to express yourself in stone. So in every other way, whatever you do, you require a skill. And it's enormously important, especially for American people, to understand that there is absolutely no possibility of having any pleasure in life at all without skill. Money doesn't buy pleasure. Ever. Look, if you want to get stone drunk and go out and get a bottle of bourbon and down it, you can't do that except for people who have practiced the distiller's art. You can't even make love without art. Where I live in Sausalito, we have a harbor full of ever so many pleasure craft, motor cruises, sailing boats, all kinds of things, and they never leave the dock. All that happens with them is their owners have cocktail parties there on Saturdays and Sundays. because they discovered, having bought these things, that the discipline of sailing is difficult to learn and takes a lot of time. And they didn't have time for it, so they just thought the thing is a status thing. So, in other words, you can't have pleasure in life without skill. But it isn't an unpleasant task to learn a skill if the teacher in the first place gets you fascinated with it. There is immense pleasure in learning how to do anything skillfully, to make carpentry things, to cook, to write, to calculate. Anything you want can be immensely pleasurable to learn the discipline, and it is completely indispensable because L. Ugh, you may be a very inspired musician. I am not a musical technologist, you see, and I regret it, but I am a word technologist. But I can hear in my head all kinds of symphonies and all kinds of marvelous compositions, but I don't have the technique to write them down on paper and share them with somebody else. Too bad. Maybe next time around. But you see, so far as words are concerned, I can express ideas because I have studied language and I have worked very hard. Not that I didn't like it. I intensely enjoy the work of writing a book, although it is difficult. But it's fascinating to say what can never possibly be said. So you see what's happening. What you have to do, you have inspiration, but then you have to have technique to incarnate, to express your inspiration. That is to say, to bring heaven down to earth and to express heaven in terms of earth. Of course, they are really one behind the scenes, but there's no way of pointing it out unless you do something skillful. You see, we are all at the moment absolutely in the midst of the beatific vision. We are all one with the divine or some, I don't like that sort of wishy-washy language, but we are all there. But we are so much there that we are like fish in water. They don't know they're in water. Like the birds don't know they're in the air because it's all around them. And in the same way, we don't know what the color of our eyes is. I don't mean whether you've got blue or brown eyes, but the color of the lens of your eye. You call that transparent, no color. See, because you can't see it. But it's basic to being able to see anything. So in order to find out where you are, there has to be some way of drawing attention to it. And that involves skill. Upaya in Sanskrit, skillful means. So it's all very well. Anybody can have ecstasy. Anybody, as a matter of fact, can become aware that he is one with the eternal ground of the universe. Let's suppose that while you were very, very high on LSD, you looked into a filthy ashtray and you saw the beatific vision, which is of course the case, because wherever you look, if your eyes are open, you will see the face of the divine. Then you come out of your ecstasy with the dirty ashtray and say to everybody, here it is, here it is. No, there is a possibility. If you are an extraordinarily skillful painter or even photographer of presenting the dirty ashtray so that everybody else will see almost what you saw, but you will have to have a technique which will translate every grain of ash into a jewel, because that's what you actually saw. But that requires mastery of an art. And I'm afraid people think that all it's necessary to do is just throw out any old thing, because under that transformed state of consciousness, any old thing is the works. But nobody else can see it if they haven't shared that point of view. So then, this becomes for us in the United States an extremely important social problem. We are living in a scientific world where secrets cannot be kept. And anyone, anytime, can pick up something which will short circuit all the ancient religious techniques, yoga practice, meditation, etc. This is all very embarrassing, but it will happen. And they will see what all those sages and Buddhists saw in ancient times.